Breaking today, Meghan Markle breaks her agreement with King Charles and Buckingham Palace to leak to her friends at People magazine less than a week after that promised meeting with Charles and Queen Camilla. Meanwhile, Prince Harry has arrived back in the United States completely fine, proving the point that I have made, by the way, for months and years, that they can travel in and out of the UK with their children privately with absolutely no issues whatsoever.
She could not help herself. Less than a week after sitting in a room at Highgrove with King Charles and Queen Camilla, less than a week after that private family reunion was confirmed by Buckingham Palace with no additional detail, deliberately no statement, no briefing, no attempt to shape what it meant, Meghan Markle's people were on the phone to People magazine. Not a general briefing, a cover story. Harry's royal reunion at last. Inside Prince Harry's turbulent UK visit. A fully produced narrative with multiple named sources, all pointing in the same direction. That Meghan was the supportive wife who stepped back graciously because she always lets Harry lead when it comes to the royal family. That she felt humiliated by the public drama. That there was a lot of sadness over how the week unfolded. And here is the problem with all of it. According to Dan Wootton and royal reporter Robert Jobson, who joined him to break it down, the agreement that Harry and Meghan made with the palace before the visit was explicit. No briefing, no narrative shaping, no running to media contacts to control the story in favor of one party. Both sides would stay quiet. The palace kept that agreement. Meghan did not. Welcome to the Marquee Report. This is the full story of the People magazine leak that broke the palace agreement, and what it reveals about everything that was really going on behind the scenes of the most chaotic royal visit in years. Let's go through the People magazine cover story specifically, because understanding what was published is essential to understanding why it represents such a significant breach. The story carries multiple anonymous sources, all telling the same version of events. Meghan planned to be by Harry's side for several outings. There was an about face when security concerns prevented her and the children from a full visit. A source who knows the couple says she would have felt humiliated watching the public back and forth unfold. Another source tells People she is very supportive of Harry and that there is a lot of sadness over how the week unfolded. And another insider adds that when it comes to Harry's dealings with his family, she always lets him lead. Dan Wootton was direct about where those sources come from. People magazine effectively operates as the house journal for the Sussexes. The sources in that story come directly from Meghan and Harry, directly from one of their friends, or directly from their communications team. There is no ambiguity about the pipeline. And here is what that cover story is doing strategically. It is separating Meghan from the disaster. It is presenting her as the gracious, supportive wife who stepped aside to let Harry manage his family relationships without her interference. It is managing the optics of her absence from the Invictus event and the public engagements, an absence that had already generated significant commentary, by reframing it as a considered choice driven by security concerns rather than what Wootton believes it actually was. His read on why Meghan did not attend the Birmingham Invictus event is more specific and more uncomfortable than the People magazine version. He believes she did not want to be photographed standing next to Harry on the week he suffered the most significant courtroom loss in modern royal history. She did not want to associate herself with someone the courts had just ruled against on all 14 counts. She calculated that absence was better than proximity to failure. People magazine presented it as a sacrifice. Wootton presented it as a calculation. Here is what makes the People magazine story more than just another Sussex media leak. Because the specific context of what was agreed beforehand matters enormously. Tom Sykes of The Royalist, whose analysis Wootton referenced directly on air, made the point that Wootton himself called brilliantly explained. It was Harry's people who fired the starting pistol on this entire saga by issuing an unprompted operational note to journalists confirming the whole California family would be coming over for what the Sussex team was already billing as a dramatic rapprochement. Harry knew that Ravek had not magically upgraded his protection. Nothing in the security situation had changed. But he went ahead and made arrangements that he then cancelled publicly. And when his people put out the second announcement, saying he was reconsidering whether to bring Meghan and the children at all, citing security concerns that had already been accepted and agreed around in the first announcement, the palace sat silent, patient, saying nothing. The palace offered accommodation. Ultimately, that offer was withdrawn, and Wootton believes that was a narrow escape for the institution, noting that if Harry had delivered his Chatham House speech from within the rooms of Buckingham Palace, the optics would have been institutionally catastrophic. But through all of it, the palace kept its side of the agreement. No briefings, no counter-narratives, no palace sources telling journalists how they really felt about the chaos of the preceding week. And then, People magazine landed with a cover story so clearly sourced from the Sussex camp that even sympathetic royal observers noted the agreement had been broken almost before the ink was dry on the Highgrove confirmation. While all of this was playing out in the media, one specific detail surfaced that Dan Wootton and Robert Jobson both identified as the single most revealing moment of Harry's entire UK week. Harry attended the Time 100 event, alone, without Meghan, and he was photographed doing something specific at that event that became the subject of significant commentary. He was lavishing praise on the photographers, the same photographers he has spent years describing as threats to his family's safety, the people whose cameras he has cited in court documents and public statements as sources of genuine terror. The industry, he has repeatedly said, forced him to flee Britain for the security and privacy of California. Wootton showed the footage. Harry at the Time 100 event, turning to photographers. Outstanding. Perfect. One lady. There's one lady. She's the best. Thank you so much. The man who spent £50 million fighting the Daily Mail over alleged privacy violations. The man whose stated reason for not bringing his family to Britain was fear of being chased by photographers. Standing at a celebrity gala, praising the same photographers with the relaxed energy of someone who has never found a camera anything other than delightful. Wootton's verdict was characteristically direct. He is a bonehead who sinks millions into failed privacy actions and says camera flashes terrify him and is now doing cheesy "have you got my best side" camera turns at celebrity galas like he is Meghan Markle. Harry also told a journalist he was sad about England losing the World Cup semi-final to Argentina. Wootton's read on that moment was equally pointed. He thinks England football fans are bonehead racists, but he will say he is sad about the result for the cameras. Royal reporter Robert Jobson, longtime member of the Royal Rota and author of the Robert Jobson Substack, joined Dan Wootton, and his analysis of the security narrative is worth examining in full because it comes from someone with direct intelligence community contacts. Jobson was direct. If you speak to people in the intelligence services, there is no threat against Harry. That is why Ravek has not stepped up the security. If there were a genuine threat, the security level would be higher, and he would receive appropriate protection provided he gave the required notice. The system exists. The process exists. The security he claims he cannot get without a permanent arrangement is available to him on a case-by-case basis for every single visit, if he simply gives appropriate notice. Jobson also addressed the fundamental absurdity of the security argument given Harry's actual travel record. Colombia is more dangerous. Nigeria is more dangerous. Ukraine is significantly more dangerous. Harry has visited all of them. He moved freely. No permanent security arrangement in those countries produced the visits anyway. The security argument as applied specifically to Britain only makes sense as a negotiating position, not as a genuine safety concern based on specific documented threats. Wootton made the point that has been visible throughout this entire saga. Harry arrived back in the United States completely fine. He traveled in and out of the UK with his children privately, with absolutely no issues whatsoever. Proving, as Wootton said, he has argued for months and years, that the travel is possible, the visits are possible, and the security concerns are being manufactured to serve a different purpose entirely. Here is the story that Wootton identified as too coordinated to be coincidental, because it arrived at exactly the moment the Sussex camp needed a new narrative to deflect from the disaster of the week. People magazine and the New York Times both published stories on the same day, placing responsibility for the ongoing brother estrangement on William. People wrote that Prince William and Prince Harry still have no contact, despite Harry's reunion with King Charles. An insider told the magazine it is so broken and that there has been no movement, especially on William's side. That framing, especially on William's side, is the specific construction that tells you where the story originated. It takes the absence of reconciliation and places the blame for it directionally. Not that reconciliation has not happened, that it has not happened because of William specifically. The New York Times ran a similar piece on the same day. Two outlets simultaneously, both left-leaning, both historically sympathetic to the Sussex brand, both running the same narrative angle on the same day. Wootton's read was that it was not a coincidence. This is the Sussex media operation, doing what it always does when a week goes badly. Find a villain. Make sure the villain is William. Get the narrative running before the palace can respond, and then watch the coverage pivot from Harry's 14-count court loss and security chaos to a story about the cold-hearted brother who will not pick up the phone. The palace said nothing. William's people said nothing. The briefing was entirely one-directional. And the publications that ran it are the same publications that have run Sussex-adjacent stories before. Here is Jobson's broader assessment of what this visit actually demonstrated about Harry's position, and it is the most honest summary of what the week produced. The bigger picture was William and Catherine at Wimbledon, William playing polo, genuine working royals, doing genuine institutional work, while Harry's visit to Birmingham barely registered as a major story. The contrast that the Sussex operation was apparently hoping would generate a narrative of Harry triumphantly returning to British public life, instead generated coverage that confirmed how marginal his presence in the British institutional landscape has become. Jobson also addressed what he called the man-child problem directly. Harry's performance on the Joe Marler podcast, talking about his grooming habits, discussing whether he is ginger or not, landing laddish banter that Jobson described as the worst thing he had ever seen from someone trying to be taken seriously. His assessment was unambiguous. If you want to be taken seriously, start being a bit serious. The Invictus Games promotional events generated positive coverage. The wheelchair rugby, the laser run, the interaction with veterans. That was Harry at his most genuine. The thing he created for the right reasons, showing up as it should. Wootton himself acknowledged he is not dissing the Invictus Games. It is a good thing. The question is how long it can continue given the financial challenges around Birmingham. But surrounding that genuine good was the full circus. The People magazine leak. The Time 100 photographer praise. The security narrative that intelligence sources say has no basis in actual threat assessment. The coordinated media briefing blaming William. The Meghan absence that was reframed as a gracious choice rather than a calculated one. All of it pointing in the same direction. The show must go on, even when the show is falling apart. Here is where everything stands right now. Meghan broke the palace agreement by leaking the Highgrove reunion story to People magazine less than a week after the visit ended. The palace said nothing. The briefing was entirely one-directional. The People magazine cover presented Meghan as the supportive wife who stepped aside graciously. Wootton and Jobson believe she stepped aside because she calculated proximity to Harry's court loss was commercially and reputationally damaging. Harry praised photographers at the Time 100 event, the same photographers his legal team has spent years citing as threats to his family's safety. He arrived back in the United States completely fine, proving the security argument has no basis in genuine threat assessment. The New York Times and People magazine ran simultaneous stories placing blame for the brother estrangement on William on the same day, and Buckingham Palace, which kept its side of the agreement, responded to the People magazine cover story with the same thing it has been doing throughout this entire visit. Nothing. No statement, no counter-briefing, no response to the leak. Just silence. The most powerful communication available to an institution that has been playing this long game for considerably longer than Harry and Meghan have been playing theirs. She could not help herself, and the palace simply continued. This has been the Marquee Report. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. See you on the next one.